Welcome to the debate. This is the Global WarWatch Network. Israel has ordered a full evacuation of Gaza City as it prepares to expand military operations in the north. With famine already gripping the population, hundreds of thousands are now caught in a desperate struggle for survival. What happens next could reshape the entire conflict. Today, we're examining the Israeli military's recent directive for a full evacuation of Gaza City and its impending, expanded offensive. We'll be analyzing these actions against the backdrop of a severe humanitarian crisis and the frankly complex realities on the ground for the Palestinian population. So, the central question before us is this: is the Israeli military strategy involving this full evacuation order and intensified operations, is it a necessary and justifiable military approach to dismantle Hamas? Or do the profound humanitarian challenges and, practical impediments just render it ineffective and ethically problematic? I'll be arguing that these measures are critical, necessary steps to achieve Israel's security objectives by targeting Hamas's military infrastructure.
And my perspective differs significantly here. While I certainly acknowledge the stated military objectives, I do have to challenge the effectiveness and, the ethical implications of this strategy. My focus is really going to be on the immense humanitarian cost and the practical impossibility for so many civilians to actually comply with an order like this, which raises, I think, serious questions about its true impact.
Okay. So, to begin, the Israeli military's directive. This was Tuesday, September 9th, 2025, for a full evacuation of Gaza City. Now, this represents the first such widespread warning in this specific conflict. It's different from prior, more localized alerts for specific neighborhoods. This order comes directly before a planned expanded offensive and a ground incursion. The stated aim is taking control of what it portrays as Hamas's last remaining stronghold in northern Gaza. Now, from my perspective, this is a legitimate and critical military objective, a direct response to the October 7th, 2023 attacks. In preparation, Israel has already demolished, I think the number is 50 high-rise buildings in just the 2 days before the evacuation order, citing their use by Hamas for military infrastructure. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself called these demolitions only the introduction to a larger ground operation.
And the provision of these warnings, as military spokesperson Colonel Avichai Adrei confirmed, is to allow civilians to move south to a designated humanitarian zone with promises of assistance for those who comply. This, I'd argue, demonstrates a clear effort to separate combatants from non-combatants, which is, a fundamental principle of armed conflict.
Well, I find it difficult to accept that warnings alone, however widespread they might be, constitute a justifiable or even effective approach in the current context. This evacuation order, remember, is issued amidst a truly catastrophic humanitarian situation. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in northern Gaza already struggling under conditions of famine. So, for the estimated 1 million Palestinians in the Gaza City area, complying with this order faces severe, if not outright impossible practical challenges. Many are just exhausted from multiple displacements. They've been moved repeatedly. They face profound uncertainty about safety in southern Gaza, where existing displacement sites are already critically overcrowded. And then there's the cost. The prohibitive cost of over $1,000 for a family to move south is simply, out of reach for most people. Actually, Associated Press reporters observed only an increase in vehicle movement, but crucially, no widespread evacuation. That indicates very few Palestinians have actually left. And on top of that, Palestinian officials, including Dr. Munir al-Borsh and Dr. Rami Mahina of Shifa Hospital, they've publicly rejected these warnings. They're saying healthcare workers will not leave, and they're calling for protection for the vital services they provide. Even families of Israeli hostages have pleaded with lawmakers to halt the offensive, arguing that deals like the one that released Ayir and Horn are the right way to free the rest of the hostages. So that suggests that even within Israel, there's a questioning of the efficacy and, the broader implications of this purely military-first strategy.
Right. I understand why you highlight the immense difficulties. I really do. But it's crucial to approach the efficacy and humanitarian impact of these evacuation orders from a slightly different angle. While it's undeniably challenging for civilians, this evacuation order is arguably a necessary measure to protect them by trying to differentiate them from combatants while simultaneously enabling these crucial military operations against Hamas. Look, Hamas intentionally operates within civilian areas. We know that. They embed their military infrastructure within residential buildings, public spaces. This tactic, well, it fundamentally shifts the ethical landscape of urban warfare, doesn't it? It forces militaries into a dilemma where any action, even necessary ones, to dismantle a terror organization will inevitably carry immense civilian risk and, let's face it, international scrutiny. The very act of issuing warnings, despite these difficulties, I believe, demonstrates an effort to minimize civilian harm, even when the enemy exploits civilian presence. Without such targeted operations, Hamas's capabilities would remain intact, posing a continuous threat to Israel and ultimately prolonging the conflict and its human toll.
That's a compelling point regarding Hamas's tactics, but it still doesn't fully address the practical and ethical chasm between just issuing an order and actually enabling its compliance. I mean, given the widely reported lack of widespread evacuation, how can this order truly be deemed an effective military strategy, or frankly, a genuine effort to protect civilians, when compliance is demonstrably impossible for so many? The UN Humanitarian Agency highlights not just the prohibitive costs you mentioned, but the catastrophic state of overcrowded displacement sites. Aid groups have warned there's, quote, little infrastructure to support them in the south. And we still see, over 86,000 tents awaiting clearance to even enter Gaza. The AP reporter's observations confirm this. There just hasn't been widespread movement. So, if the conditions for compliance are virtually non-existent for the vast majority of the population it impacts, is the order truly fulfilling its stated humanitarian aim? Or is it just creating an impossible choice for civilians caught in the crossfire?
Okay, I acknowledge the immense challenges on the ground, and no one, absolutely no one, denies the tragic difficulty for civilians. However, COGAT, the Israeli defense body, reported that 1,500 humanitarian aid trucks did enter Gaza last week. And there are plans, they say, to bring in 100,000 tents in the coming weeks, albeit adapted with plastic poles to meet needs. The military's objective to remove Hamas from its strongholds is paramount for long-term regional stability. And these efforts, despite the overwhelming scale of the crisis, do show an attempt to mitigate civilian suffering within a war context. So let me ask you, what alternative approach do you propose for a military seeking to dismantle deeply embedded infrastructure without issuing such orders? Wouldn't that risk even greater civilian casualties from direct engagement in populated areas? This is about dismantling a terrorist organization that initiated this conflict on October 7th, 2023, and continues to pose an existential threat.
My primary concern there is that these aid provisions, while yes noted, are simply insufficient and far too delayed, especially in the face of widespread famine and the displacement of, 90% of Gaza's 2 million people. I mean, over 64,000 Palestinians have reportedly been killed since the war began, with roughly half being women and children. That highlights the devastating scale we're talking about. The fact that dozens of families are left, quote, on the streets without shelter after residential tower attacks, that just underscores the severe inadequacy of current support. The scale of the humanitarian disaster far outstrips the reported aid efforts. This isn't merely about logistical challenges, it's about whether the humanitarian framework can ever truly catch up to, or even meaningfully address the level of destruction being wrought.
Okay, moving beyond the immediate humanitarian concerns and the efficacy of the evacuation orders themselves, we also need to address the strategic rationale behind Israel's demolitions of those high-rise buildings. Now, on that front, I maintain that this is a legitimate military tactic. Israel accuses Hamas of using these structures for military infrastructure, command centers, rocket storage, tunnel entrances. As Prime Minister Netanyahu stated, this is a direct response to a threat and part of the main intensive operation. Look, when Hamas embeds its military assets within civilian infrastructure, these demolitions become regrettably a necessary part of dismantling the group's capabilities, ultimately aiming to reduce future threats against Israeli civilians. The military's intention here is to neutralize specific military targets, not to cause indiscriminate harm.
Well, while targeting military infrastructure is certainly a component of warfare, I come at it from a different way when considering the sheer scale of destruction. 50 high-rises demolished in just 2 days. That has an immense civilian impact that stretches far beyond any immediate military objectives. Civil defense reports that emergency responders can't even rescue those trapped under rubble due to a lack of equipment, so that highlights a broader crisis of infrastructure and the immediate danger to lives. This isn't just about neutralizing military targets, it's about the obliteration of civilian capacity to survive and eventually recover. The legal and moral responsibility for ensuring proportionality, it still rests with the attacking party, and I worry it establishes a dangerous precedent if civilian protection is consistently outweighed by operational expediency, regardless of the enemy's tactics. And this context, including the killing of 2 14-year-old Palestinian boys in Jenin just days before, and the punitive sanctions imposed in response to the Jerusalem bus stop attack, well, it seems to indicate a pattern where the civilian population bears a disproportionate burden in this broader conflict.
You raise an interesting point about proportionality, though. I would frame it slightly differently. The responsibility for the initial embedding of military assets within civilian infrastructure rests squarely with Hamas. That tactical choice directly complicates operations and places civilians at risk. Demolitions, though tragic in their consequences, are, as I said, a regrettably necessary component of dismantling Hamas's command and control, rocket launching sites, and other capabilities that threaten Israel. How does one reconcile the imperative to protect one's own civilian population from ongoing attacks when the adversary deliberately shields itself within another civilian population? I mean, it truly forces us to confront the agonizing choices commanders face in this complex form of urban warfare.
My counter to that would be that the responsibility for the protection of civilians and the proportionality of force still rests with the attacking party. That's a foundational principle of international humanitarian law. The broader context of escalating violence, including incidents like the Jenin killing and collective punitive measures like sanctions and visa cancellations in response to attacks, all of it points to a cycle where the civilian population is bearing an unsustainable and, yes, disproportionate burden. So this strategy seems to prioritize military objectives at a devastating human cost that profoundly questions its long-term viability and its ethical foundation for everyone involved. And it compels us to question whether the means can ever truly justify such immense human suffering, even in pursuit of legitimate security aims. Okay, in summary then, the expanded offensive in Gaza City, which includes the evacuation order and the targeting of what Israel identifies as Hamas infrastructure, is presented as a difficult but indispensable military strategy. It aims to achieve a critical security objective by dismantling Hamas's remaining strongholds, which is viewed as essential for protecting Israeli citizens from future attacks and securing, hopefully, long-term regional stability.
And my conclusion remains that while stated military objectives are certainly present, the current strategy inflicts an overwhelming and unsustainable humanitarian toll. It renders evacuation practically impossible for many and exacerbates an already dire crisis, which profoundly questions its overall effectiveness and, yes, its ethical standing in the face of such widespread suffering and displacement. Indeed, what is clear, I think we can agree, is that the consequences for all involved in this conflict are deeply intertwined and devastating. There are no simple answers to the complexities we've discussed today.
Absolutely. And understanding these multiple perspectives is crucial, I believe, for appreciating the profound challenges inherent in this conflict, and for any listener seeking a more comprehensive grasp of the situation.
Thank you for your time and participation. We encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to Global WarWatch Network for more in-depth discussions. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below and join us on social media. The links are provided in the description.